Coming up on today's show, a shark is trapped in the Seine River during a triathlon in the new Netflix movie Under Paris. Stay tuned. Welcome to Scary World, where we walk you through the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I am your host, Arturo Padilla.
Hi.
For those of you just joining us, don't forget to subscribe up above and say what's up down below. We have one major rule around here: no spoilers. Now that we got that out of the way, there are 5 categories: production, story, ensemble, horror, and legacy. Each category can earn a maximum of 2 points.
Showtime.
Per IMDb, the synopsis goes, to save Paris from a bloodbath, a grieving scientist is forced to face her tragic past when a giant shark appears in the Seine. This movie was directed by Xavier Gens, who had previously directed Mayhem, which we covered way back in the beginning of the year, and he also directed Frontiers, which is one of my favorite extreme French horror movies. This movie, Under Paris, looks good. Gens made sure all the shots were framed well and composed well. He made sure that all the CG that was used blended well with the live action sequences. The sound editing was also executed well. It helped elevate the underwater action. The movie was also pieced together well, and visually, it's a success. There isn't great technicality behind this movie, but Gens made sure that everything on the screen looked coherent, especially with all the CG that they had to implement. The underwater sequences look very good. The action underwater looks good.
Where is she? He's here.
Chris, there's no one in it. Get out of there, Chris.
They made sure to shoot that stuff very well because we get a lot of underwater scenes here. It's clearly shot. You see everything that's going on underneath the water. There's no murkiness to it. You see everything that you need to see, and that is a breath of fresh air. A lot of times with shark movies and just movies that involve water and horror, it's very murky. It's very murky. You don't understand what is going on, what's left, what's right, what's down, what's up. And in this movie, they do a very good job making sure that the audience is very well situated underwater and knows how the action is going down. And for the well shot underwater action, the good use of CG that's blended very well into the movie, this movie gets a solid 1 for production. The story and the script of this movie is where it all falls apart. It takes an enormous amount of suspension of disbelief to get through this movie. The first 2 acts are full of exposition, poor development, and nonsense scientific jargon. This movie drags, and it is unwatchable for the majority of the first hour of the movie until it hits the middle of the second act. During this portion of the story, they decided that this thing was not going that great for them, and they decided to crank up the action and the horror to 11, and this is where everything just starts going right for the movie. All this action leads into the third act of this movie, which was surprisingly entertaining and captivating and actually washes away the stink of the previous hour. They did a very good job with the third act, a surprisingly good job with the third act, especially because this script was pretty much taped together by about 6 or 7 hands. There's no real story or screenplay credit here with one person. There's scenarios and there's a little bit here, a little bit there, and they all piece this thing together. This is why this movie is not that great story-wise, but once they get into the middle of the second act, where they get into the catacombs and there's a huge set piece there, things get going and things get a lot more interesting in this story. And this was not going that great for them, but this third act, folks, let me tell you, it is actually one of the best third acts I've seen in a long time in a shark movie. And I really cannot praise the third act enough. It made this thing watchable. It made it actually good at the end of the movie. And that's like, whoa, especially after you watch that first hour, you realize that this thing is not going that great. But then you get the third act and you get all the action and all the violence there, and that's where it really hits the sweet spot. And for the very awesome third act that we get that saves this movie for being absolute trash, this movie gets a 1 for story. I really love the way this thing ended. I wish they would have done this sooner in the movie, man. It would have made for such a compelling story. But lo and behold, that's what happens when you get into the Netflix horror territory. You get the good with the bad, you get the bad with the good, and hits and misses. But this third act, it definitely shined. The cast does an admirable job with their characters. There's not much development happening, but at least they had good dynamics and were not a detriment to the overall execution of this production. Our protagonist, Berenice Bejo, does her best to anchor this movie. She has gone through some things in this movie, and she is the emotional anchor here. We're supposed to follow her all throughout. It doesn't really hit that much, but she does do a solid job with the character. I think the writing has something to do with the way the development of her story comes about. So I'm not gonna really hold that against the actress. I think she did a very solid job with the circumstances and the story given. Another solid cast member is Nassim Lies, who portrays Adil. You remember Nassim Lies from Xavier Jens' previous movie Mayhem, in that crazy brutal action romp. In this movie, he doesn't get all the action and all the work that he did there, but he does a solid job making sure he is good in support, and he's making sure that the protagonist is the one that shines. Other than that, there's not much here to call home about. The sharks are the main story, and we will get to that in our next segment. And for the decent cast that does a good job with their characters, this movie gets a 1 for ensemble. It's not bad, it's not great, but they do not make this a bad movie. The story is what made this a bad movie. The characters did their best, the actors did their best. I've seen them do other really good work, so this is definitely a fault of poor storytelling and probably poor direction. The highlight of this movie, as it should be, are the brutal shark attacks. There is no mercy with our antagonist, and it's much, much, much appreciated, because this movie is very, very boring and not good until all the shark attacks start happening. Yes, there is a lot of fodder in here, but who cares? There's nothing going on, so you might as well just kill a bunch of people who are very annoying, and that's exactly what happens here. It livened up the entire movie and really helped turn this into a very fun, captivating watch by the end of it. The majority of the blood and gore is CG, but they also incorporate practical effects into the aftermath shots once the shark is done with its food. The CG shark looks good, and they're not afraid to showcase it. Like I said before, in production, we get a lot of clear underwater shots. The shark is the main attraction here, and they focus everything on that shark. It looks good. Yes, it's full of CGI, but I've seen a whole lot worse than in this movie. I think they did a great job animating it. I think they did a great job with the texture of the shark. The attacks look good. You get to see it out of the water a couple times throughout the third act, and it looks awesome. I really like the fact that they decided to just say, screw it, let's just give this thing a bunch of fodder, because this is all we can really do right now, is showcase the shark and how awesome and brutal and merciless it really is. And for all the awesome shark action and the high body count, this movie gets a 1 for horror. I really wish they would have started this sooner in the movie. Yes, the opening sequence involves a shark attack, but it's nothing like we see in the last portion of the movie. I really do wish they would have started this a whole lot sooner. It would have made the movie a lot more entertaining and a lot more fun to watch. But I am glad that we got what we got in the second portion of the movie, because that was awesome. This movie was headed in the wrong direction until they decided to crank up the violence and the blood. The shark action was a treat to watch and truly helped elevate this film. It was not enough to make this a good movie, but it was enough to make sure that you didn't leave completely disappointed. As I kept saying before, the third act in this movie definitely shines, and you're gonna think twice about this movie after you watch the third act, and you're gonna be like, why didn't they do this sooner? It was such a good idea at the end there that if they would have definitely started that in the middle of the second act instead of all the way at the end, we would have had a successful movie, and one that people would be talking about today. Unfortunately, that's not what we got, but what we got, I think, was pretty fun at the end of it. And for that awesome third act that I keep praising, the ideas there were really good. This movie gets a 1 for legacy. I really liked the way they ended this thing. That's all I really keep thinking about, the potential and the possibility of what could have been if they had a better writing team behind the script and if they had a better idea of what they wanted, because it seems like the ideas were a little bit all over the place. This is why everything became a little bit ridiculous. But that third act, folks, trust me, hear me out. That third act, it was really good. So to tally it up, Under Paris received a 1 for production, a 1 for story, a 1 for ensemble, a 1 for horror, and a 1 for legacy, bringing its total score up to a 5. This could have gone so much worse, but it also could have gone so much better. That's why this thing is like right in the middle, because it's like, you give me some really cool ideas here, but then you also give me some really bad ideas. The whole science behind it is just mind-numbing and confusing, and you don't want to start picking that apart. You just want to get straight to the action. And this is why I wish they would have started all that sooner to make this a more watchable, more enjoyable movie experience. Go watch Under Paris. It's streaming on Netflix now.
Can you tell me what time it is?
And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for watching Scary World. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and hit the thumbs up on the video. Most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Tell all your friends, your family, and their pets to come on down to CorpseFeed. Hit the subscribe button. We are dropping spoiler-free horror movie reviews all week long, and we also have the official CorpseFeed podcast dropping every Tuesday, where you can hear all the spoilery good stuff there. We are also on all the socials. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Go drop us some stars and some reviews on all the podcast streamers. And folks, we will see you next time for another episode. Remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.